Today, what I want to do is I want to give you 3 words that I think if we will choose to live these 3 words in all of life's circumstances, even in the worst of moments, we can choose, if we'll live by these 3 words, to live the dream even when life feels more like you're living in a nightmare.
On June 17, 2011, I found myself sitting in a waiting room in the ICU at Vanderbilt Medical Center in Nashville, while the doctors were working on my 33-year-old husband, who had been diagnosed with a rare form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma just 48 hours earlier. After some time had passed, the doctors came out and they called my name. They led me to a room, invited me to sit down, and proceeded to give me the news that they did everything they could, but he was gone. What? How was I a widow at 33? How was I going to tell our girls, who were 15 and 12 at the time, that their hero was gone? How was I going to provide for us? I'd been a stay-at-home mom up until this point. I could not possibly go on without my rock, my provider, the love of my life. My world was completely shattered. How was I ever going to pick up the pieces? I was never going to be okay again. I sat in that little room for what seemed like forever, begging God to have made a mistake. Please, God, tell me you meant to take somebody else's husband. I bargained with God, telling him if only he'd bring my husband back, I'd live my life proclaiming what he had done. Dave and I had a whole life to live together. Before I left that room, I knew I was going to have to trust in God's plan, lean into his understanding, feel his peace that passes all understanding. I knew without God's strength, I would not survive this, and my kids would be casualties of essentially losing both of their parents. So I chose to cling to God and walk in his strength. I showed up to church and raised my hand in surrender, with tears streaming down my face in worship every Sunday, knowing that if I didn't seek God, I would wonder where he was. He would seem distant and silent, and I would be overwhelmed at the thoughts that filled my mind. Even though I knew that truth, it was hard to hold steadfast to it, especially every year when June comes around. I would allow Satan to fill my head with thoughts that I would be alone for the rest of my very long life, that no one had room for me in their lives, and that I was an outcast, and that no one truly loved me, that I was destined to be alone. I had a constant war going on in my head, knowing that God was sovereign and he would not leave me or forsake me, but giving into the lies that seemed to always lurk just above me. Then this past year, I chose to allow God to redeem June. I was no longer going to be afraid of dates on a calendar. God's faithfulness on my journey has not wavered. God had placed the most amazing community of friends who are much more like flesh and blood in my life, who point me straight back to the truth that Jesus holds the key to life and death. Not me, and definitely not the enemy. That Jesus is not only the promise maker, but the promise keeper. I refuse to allow Satan to steal an entire month of my life when that same month holds entirely way too many precious and happy memories. If you see me and have a smile on my face, it's because I have this joy that can only come from the Lord. Even in the darkest day that still come, I have unspeakable joy. I am free to miss my precious husband, to feel robbed that he won't ever walk our daughters down the aisle to give their hand in marriage or hold our future grandchildren, but I will choose joy. After all, I am promised eternity with Jesus for simply believing in him. There is freedom in Christ, even when you cannot see the end of your circumstances.
So this is week 4 of Plot Twists. If you brought a Bible, go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 40 and 41. If you can believe it, we're going to try to cover most of 2 chapters today as we continue our journey through the life of Joseph, as we're learning about how God has this incredible way through his sovereignty of taking the plot of our stories and twisting it for our good and his glory. He's great at it. So far, though, in Joseph's life, we're about 11 or 12 years in by the time we get to this Genesis 40 and 41. And so far, things have gone really bad for Joseph. If you look back at some of the things that he's gone through, it's been betrayal and slavery. He's been framed for rape and falsely imprisoned, and that's where we meet up with him in chapter 40. If you remember from chapter 39, he was tempted by, or Potiphar's wife was trying to seduce him, and he wouldn't stand for it, and he ran out of the house, and so she framed him for rape, and her husband had to throw him in prison. And so that's where we meet up with him in chapter 40. And so far, 10, 11, 12 years of these things have been happening to Joseph. It's been terrible. So the title of the message that I'm about to give you is probably going to sound a little ironic or maybe opposite because it doesn't sound accurate. But let me give it to you anyway and help you understand where we're headed. The title of the message today is Living the Dream. And it may sound ironic because when you look back through Joseph's life, it sounds the opposite of that. Typically, when you think of the phrase living the dream, that is a day like we have right now in Clarksville, Tennessee, with 76 and sunny, and you might have convertible top down and sunglasses on, and you're like, man, living the dream, right? Living the dream is what I'm going to be saying this afternoon when I'm napping in my hammock, okay? LTD, living the dream. That's what I'm going to be saying. But you know, when we think about Joseph's circumstances, it doesn't feel like he's really living the dream right now. Now, speaking of dreams, his story is full of dreams. In fact, today in these 2 chapters, we're going to cover 4 different dreams from 3 different people. Joseph's story, in fact, in Genesis 37, kicked off with 2 dreams, God-given dreams that God had given Joseph that were kind of letting him into God's future plans for Joseph. But, again, when you look back through Joseph's life, it seems like maybe living the dream is not exactly accurate. Or maybe even the dreams that God had placed on Joseph's life were not exactly accurate. All of the things so far have taken him so far away, you might think, from what God originally intended, that how could God ever use this for good? And so today what I want to do is I want to give you 3 words that I think if we will choose to live these 3 words in all of life's circumstances, even in the worst of moments, we can choose, if we'll live by these 3 words, to live the dream even when life feels more like you're living in a nightmare. Okay, let me give you 3 words, and then what we're going to do is we're going to walk through Joseph's story and learn from his example 4 ways that we can live out these words. Here are the 3 words. Ready? Write these down. First of all, prayerful, faithful, available. Prayerful, faithful, and available. Can we say those together? Ready? Come on. Prayerful, faithful, available. Now everybody. Ready? Prayerful, faithful, available. We're going to learn, because Joseph personifies these words, what it looks like in good times and in bad to live these things out. And you'll learn that you're living the dream, the dream that God has for your life when you will choose to live this way in all circumstances. And Joseph does it so well. Let's start in Genesis 40, verse 1. It says, sometime after this, now of course our background is that Joseph has been thrown in prison, framed and falsely imprisoned. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was very angry with his 2 officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. And he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. Do you believe that God doesn't deal in coincidences? God doesn't, it's not accidental that there are people in your life that maybe you thought it was just an accident. It was just a coincidence that we ran into each other. It's no coincidence that the baker, that the cupbearer, and Joseph are all hanging out in a place that none of them wanted to be. Okay, so there's a purpose behind it. And it says in verse 3, he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined, and the captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. Let me explain what's happening here. Based on the fact that it's the cupbearer and the baker, tells us that since they are now confined where the king's prisoners would go, they're in a prison cell where normally the prisoners would be confined while the king is doing an official investigation to render a verdict. And based on the fact that this is the cupbearer and the baker, the 2 people who are responsible to make sure that the king's food is healthy and of top-notch, food and drink, probably this points toward there's a good chance that maybe there was a plot to assassinate Pharaoh. Maybe there was some poison that was found. Maybe there was a plot that was uncovered somewhere. And the baker and the cupbearer are at the middle of this, and they're trying to determine who is guilty and who is innocent. And so they're locked up for some time with Joseph. Verse 5, one night they both dreamed. the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. And when Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" And they said to him, "We've had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them." They didn't know who they were talking to, right? Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." Write this down. You need to learn to remain, here's those three words, prayerful, faithful, and available. Here's our first circumstance, even when it's easier to focus on yourself. And aren't there a lot of times where it's easier to focus on yourself? We have to learn to be prayerful, faithful, and available, even when it's easier to focus on ourselves. Now, let's think about Joseph for a moment. Don't you think it's probably pretty justifiable for Joseph to be throwing his own little pity party, crying in a corner because of all that he's been through so far? I think if we're honest, a lot of us would be real tempted to be in that spot if we were him. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery into Egypt, framed for rape, falsely accused and imprisoned. Like, this guy had every justifiable reason to be completely inwardly focused and not thinking or caring about anybody else. But here's what somebody does who is prayerful, faithful, and available. Here's what they do. He does a few things. Notice verse 6. He notices that something is going on with these people. Do you see it? Verse 6. He saw that they were troubled. He at least temporarily got his eyes off of his pain and saw somebody else's. This is what a servant does. He notices. Now, this can happen, especially in a place like this, in a church, if you will simply get in the habit of looking and caring about some other people besides just yourself. He noticed, but then he took it a step further, because noticing is good, but it's easy to notice that somebody's not going through a good day and then just kind of like walk around them like, I ain't got time for that drama, right? Too much drama for me, mama. I'm just going to head this way, and I got enough drama in my life, and I don't need your drama. And it's one thing to notice. It's another thing to do what he does next. It says in verse 7, he asked, "Why are your faces downcast today?" So he noticed, and then he asked. But then he took it a step further. The third thing that he does in verse 8, he volunteers to help. He goes, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Why don't you tell them to me? Let's see if I can help. I happen to know the God who knows the answer to your dreams. Let me see if I can help." So listen, even if the title servant is not your official title, hear me on this. If you're a follower of Jesus, you exist to serve. Do you believe that? You exist to serve. If you are a follower of Jesus, your life is about so much more than your life. And there are going to be so many times where it is tempting to think just about yourself, easier to focus just on you. But God's going to use you. If you'll let him, God will use you wherever you are, even if it's in a place that you never wanted to be. How amazing is that? If we would just say, man, I don't love where I am. I don't love this season that I'm in. I'm not digging the pain that I'm a part of right now. I kind of, man, this is super challenging what I'm against. I didn't plan on moving here. We're not looking forward to this new move that's coming next. We're not, whatever you're thinking, but you could say, man, I can either just wallow in my own pain, or I could choose right now to lift my eyes off of my pain and put it on somebody else's pain. Because I guarantee there's somebody else who's going through something as well. In fact, I've found, maybe you found this as well, that one of the best ways for me to stop worrying so much about my pain is to help somebody else through their pain, is to be there to serve somebody else. Be there on the lookout for something that somebody else is going through in their life. And you know, the amazing thing about pain is that pain opens. See, these guys were in pain, and Joseph could see it on their face. They were stressed about these dreams they just had. The amazing thing about pain is that pain opens opportunities that you and I may never be able to open any other way. Think about it this way. An open wound can be an open door for you to speak into somebody's life. We're not wanting pain for other people, but praise God, he can use our pain, right? And so here's the great thing. You know, what we need to do is, as we're prayerful, faithful, and available with the people all around us in our lives, We pray. I talk to people periodically. They're like, man, I've been witnessing, I've been sharing my faith with this guy, and he just keeps shutting me down, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. That's okay. Here's what you do. You keep praying for him. Life at some point is going to hit. We don't want pain in that person's life. We're not praying for pain in that person's life. But as you remain prayerful, faithful, and available, when pain hits, and you've built a bridge into that person's life, there's a good possibility that hopefully they'll be willing to swallow their pride and come back and talk to you. I remember that one guy who always talked to me about having hope, and now that I'm hopeless, I need some hope. Maybe the bridge that you're building right now won't be used for another 5 years, but you got to be faithful, right? Prayerful, faithful, available in every season, even when it's most tempting to look just at yourself. Joseph could have justified, I'm just going to focus on me right now. But he noticed, and he asked, and he volunteered to help. Faithful, prayerful, faithful, and available. Let's keep reading verse 9. The chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, there was a vine before me. And the vine, on the vine, there were 3 branches. And as soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. And you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me. This is Joseph's little plea. He goes, man, when you get out of the slammer, please remember me. When it's well with you, please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews. And here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the pit. He goes, you're falsely accused. I'm falsely accused as well. When you get out, when you see that God has given you the answer through your dream, would you just remember that I told you this? And remember that I'm here also. Remember me, okay? So now, verse 16, watch this. The chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable. So you know where this is going. He goes, oh, you're passing out good news? I could use some good news, right? So he goes to Joseph. He said, I also had a dream. Verse 16, there were 3 cake baskets on my head. Now, the dream starts off pretty good. Anytime a dream starts with cake, we're going in the right direction, right? Can I get an amen for that? All right, verse 17. In the uppermost basket, there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered. He goes, I imagine Joseph swallowed hard. This one's not going to turn out so great. This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days, the same as the first dream. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, same as the cupbearer's dream. But here's where it takes a turn. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. It took like a Alfred Hitchcock turn there at the end. Wasn't expecting that plot twist. All of a sudden, he introduces that. That was a tough one, I imagine, for Joseph to deliver. But here's the thing. Joseph understands that the interpretation or the content of the words he is supposed to deliver to this guy is not up to him. He's simply the conduit that the message is flowing through to the one he's delivering it to. Write this down. We need to be prayerful, faithful, and available, even when, number 2, the results may not be good. The cupbearer's dream, I imagine, was pretty fun to share, fun to interpret. Restoration in 3 days. Dude, in 3 days, you're going to be out. You'll be back to your job. You'll be declared innocent. It's going to be great. So the chief baker wants some good news as well. But here's the thing. Faithfulness, Joseph is embodying this word faithful. Faithfulness means you're willing to do the right thing in the times that it's easy and it's noticed and you're thanked for it, but more importantly, in the times where it goes unnoticed or it's challenging to do. That's faithfulness, where you go, if it's the right thing, I'm going to do it no matter what it costs me. When Joseph had to say to the cupbearer, man, come here, I got to hug you. This is so amazing what God's going to do. He's going to restore you. In 3 days, you're going to be out of here. But then I imagine with a lump in his throat, he had to now share the second interpretation of the second dream to the baker that was going to end tragically for him. You're going to be found guilty, and it's going to end in your death in 3 days. He had to deliver that message. Why? Because he's being faithful. Listen, Speaking and serving in good times and in bad is the definition of faithfulness. When it's easy and when it's hard, when it's noticed, when it goes unnoticed, when you want to and when you don't. The Bible would call it in season and out of season. The Bible says in 2 Timothy, Paul's writing to Timothy, and he says, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. I understand that as a pastor. There are many times where I feel like it's an in-season message. I can't wait to deliver this message. It's going to encourage people. It's going to bring people to Christ. I'm so excited about it. And then there are times where I know God has given me what I would call an out-of-season message, a baker message, where man, honestly, I got to kind of swallow hard and pray even bigger and just, God, I'm just the conduit. I'm just the one that I feel like you are going to choose to deliver this message through. It's probably not going to be my choice of words to these people, but I know you want me to speak it. This is faithfulness, prayerful, faithful, available. Joseph is being that. So he's constantly going back to God in prayer. How else would he know the interpretation of a dream? Even though it doesn't say he stepped aside and prayed, I imagine he must have asked the Lord, God, give me the interpretation here. Prayerful, he was faithful, and then he was available. God, whatever you want to speak through me, this isn't going to be easy, but it's going to be the right thing. So here's the thing. The in season and out of season, the cupbearer and the baker messages are both important. We just tend to jump at the cupbearer ones, the ones where you get to hug people and encourage them. But when it comes to the baker ones, where this is probably going to be a little discouraging and the results may not be good, we tend to shy away from those. But both are necessary. And hear me out on this. It's not your job or mine to censor them or to choose whether or not we're going to say them. It's still our job to deliver the gift that God has given us, whether it seems good or bad. So when serving, or in Joseph's case, delivering truth, the results are not our job. It's just the delivery. It's like the UPS guy who comes to your house. It's not his job to determine what's in the box. When he gets to your house, he doesn't go through the truck like, I wonder which one I should drop off here, right? Oh, that one looks good. He doesn't determine what's in the box. He doesn't even determine who it's addressed to. He just goes, I have this box. I'm not sure what's in it. Here, it's for you. His job is simply to be faithful with the delivery. It's the same with all of us. You've been given a gift, and it is not your job to determine its contents or who it is delivered to. It is simply your job to be the delivery person, to be faithful, prayerful, faithful, available with whatever that is, whether it's a cupbearer encouraging moment or a baker discouraging moment. It's about your faithfulness with the opportunity God has put in front of you. So you got to be faithful with those gifts, with the opportunities, whether it's easy or whether it's hard. So what happens with the dreams? Verse 20. If you skip ahead, you get done with the dreams. There's telling him, Joseph tells him the interpretation. It says on the third day, verse 20, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. So he brings them out. He says, I'm about to give my verdict here. Verse 21, he restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Check, the dream comes true. Verse 22, he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Check, the second dream comes true. What about Joseph? Verse 23, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Another bad turn for Joseph. Write this down. Remain prayerful, faithful, and available. Number 3, when things are taking longer than you planned. Because that's tough, isn't it? We hate being faithful when it's just taking way too long. God, we're 12 years into this. Come on, surely by now you could do this tomorrow if you wanted to. Like, I'm kind of sick of the twists and the turns and the timetable here. I imagine for Joseph, it was pretty hard to be in prison, falsely accused. He knows his innocence. I imagine it was hard for him to be in prison and then watch people come into prison and go out of prison, and he stays there. I imagine it was pretty challenging for him to see other people be restored to their position and found innocent when he knows he's innocent and he remains in prison. Sometimes, let's be honest, You're in the middle of some suffering or some pain, and you honestly don't want to hear about how great other people's lives are. You're like, I'm so happy that you're so #blessed, but I'm not really right now. Could you keep your praise reports to yourself, you know? Like, oh, hallelujah, but I've got a pity party going on over here, and I don't want to hear. I got enough drama. Would you like some of my drama? I'd happily share some of that with you. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own pain that it's got to be hard. It had to be hard for Joseph to see this. We do this all the time, you know. When other people's lives are blessed or there's something great taking place in their lives, it's easy for us to be discouraged by that. Whether it's, you know, it could be any number of things that's happening in somebody's life. Like, I heard that you guys got pregnant, and man, that's so cool. But my husband and I, my wife and I, we've been wanting that. And, you know, man, I'm in another wedding, and I want it to be my wedding one day, and I just feel like I've been in so many of these, and how much longer is this going to take? And everybody else got the job promotion that I've been working for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and like, when's it going to be my shot? Man, I just can you imagine for Joseph? He's in prison, and he knows he's not supposed to be there, and yet people come in, and people leave, and he just has to be there to serve them. Sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes it feels like God forgot. Sometimes it feels like God stopped working. Sometimes, let's be real, sometimes it feels like I'm praying and my prayers are hitting the ceiling. What's the point? God's not listening anymore, you might think. God hit pause on listening. He doesn't care about me. He forgot. That's the word used about Joseph here in verse 23. The chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Let me tell you this about God. God has not forgotten you. God's timing is part of our training, because so often our timetable is off. God's timing is part of our training. In other words, there's no actual delay. You're like, God, what's the delay? There's no actual delay. You're the one who's ahead of schedule. I'm ahead of schedule. God's right on time. There's no actual delay. God is right on time. He knows exactly what he's doing. And here's the great thing about serving God. Your pain has a purpose. Listen, your pain has never been wasted with God. It's part of God's work in you so God can do more work through you. Do you believe that? In the middle of that, God's not wasting your pain. He'll redeem your pain. He's got a purpose in it. God will use your setback as a set up. So we have to choose not to give up, but to look up above our pain toward our purpose, toward the perfecter, the author and the perfecter of our faith. If he's begun something in you, he's going to complete that thing in you. Our God will take our obstacles and turn them into opportunities. He does it all the time. He'll take your divorce. He'll take your deployment. He'll take your diagnosis. He'll take your disease, and he'll turn it into our development. You're dreading, man, our next duty station. We're an Army family. We just don't know where God's going to take us after this, and I'm dreading PCS. You think PCS stands for permanent change of station? Maybe in God's economy it stands for a change of scenery, a purposeful change of scenery, so that God can prepare you for his purpose that he has for you. Maybe, just maybe what we need to do is think, man, I may be locked in this prison cell, and I see people come in and out, and things seem so great in their life, and maybe you need to stop dreading where you are and realize that God has you there for a purpose, and he'll use you in that season, even if it's in a place you never wanted to be. What if it's taken too long? Yeah, 7 people. Come on, we can celebrate that. What if it's taking longer than you thought it would take? Can you trust God in the middle? Can you go 10 years, 11 years, 12 years? Joseph is like, we don't read about the discouragement, but come on, he's a guy like us. He had to be just in anguish. There had to be days of tears. God, I was never supposed to be here. I haven't seen my family in 12 years. My dad thinks I'm dead. This wasn't God, you wanted, you gave me these dreams. It was a dream of greatness. What happened? Like, there had to be this battle going on in his heart. What do? Prayerful, faithful, available. How long? As long as it takes. Prayerful, faithful, available, even when it takes longer than you planned. Why? Because we rest in this. God has not forgotten you. He hasn't forgotten you. He's always with you. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he'll never leave you or forsake you. That's not a thing that sounds good on a Christian greeting card. That is a promise from God himself. He's not going to give up on you. And he's got you in that place, even if it's in a place that you never wanted to be, even if it's in a place that you made a whole bunch of bad decisions to get yourself in. God will use you right there if you'll just be surrendered. You're like, really? Even in prison? Yeah, even in prison. He'll bring the right people into your life so that he can set you up for something greater in the future. That's how sovereign our God is. So let's keep reading in chapter 41. Watch this. After 2 whole years, come on, it's taken way longer than Joseph had planned. We don't want to be in this circumstance. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed. Now we've got another dream. He was standing by the Nile River, big, healthy river in Egypt. And behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive. I've never heard that word used for cows. In my mind, it's like future burgers, right? 7 cows, attractive and plump. Attractive and plump. Anyways, I can't get past that. They fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin. Just get this in your mind if you can. It's a dream, so have some fun with it. Came up out of the Nile after them, and they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. They're like, what's up, attractive, plump cows? I'm the skinny one, Just skinny cows, ugly and thin, hanging out by the attractive and plump ones, all right? Now here it gets even weirder. Verse 4, the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows. They saw what I saw, future burgers, all right? They ate them up. It got all carnivorous on us, and they went cannibal. And so it says at the end of verse 4, Pharaoh awoke, because I would too, right? Verse 5, he fell asleep. I don't know how after that, but he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning, his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams. But watch this. There was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Why not? Well, because chapter 40, verse 8, the interpretation belongs to God. He's asking all the wrong guys. I feel like maybe I know somebody who could help him out. I don't know. Verse 9, the chief cupbearer said this to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and he put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. And there was a young Hebrew, and he was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. And when we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And guess what? As he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Pharaoh goes, I got to meet this guy, right? Verse 14, Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, because that's what you should do when you meet the most powerful person on the planet, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've had a dream, and there's no one who can interpret it. I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now, this is Joseph's moment. Think about it. This is it. He just got called, rescued out of prison by the most powerful man on the planet. And Joseph has something that Pharaoh, king of Egypt, wants. This is his bargaining moment. This is his moment where he goes, I got something for you. I can give this to you, but you got something for me. I need some money. I need a get out of jail free card. I need some influence. I mean, think about this. This is his moment. This is the biggest resume builder you can have, right? Imagine how good this would have looked on his resume. Chief dream interpreter for Pharaoh, king of Egypt. This was the moment that he had been waiting for. Surely this was the moment where Joseph could finally make his name known. Look what he says, verse 16. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it's not in me. God will give a favorable answer. Come on, Joseph. Like everything, 12 years, man, you deserve it. Just tell him you're Joseph. This is it, man. This is your moment to expand your influence. Make your name known. Go for it. Bargain. Downplay the magicians in Egypt and lift up the name of Joseph. He goes, no, it's not about me. God will give the answer. Do you see this? Write this down. You got to remain prayerful, faithful, and available, even when it's easier to take the credit. This was Joseph's big shot. This was it. In the morning, he woke up a slave in prison. By the afternoon, he's the consultant to the most powerful man on the planet. This could have been the moment where he took the credit. But I'll warn you that had he done that, I think this could have been the downward turn of the rest of his story, when he put himself as though he had it figured out. And he let this opportunity go to his head. Thank God he didn't. Verse 25 continues. Joseph said to Pharaoh, because Pharaoh has just told him the dreams, Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh that what he is about to do. Did you notice that? God has revealed it to you. 4 times. He's going to refer back to, it's God who's done this. Hey, it's not in me. God's going to give you the answer. It's God who's done this. It's God who's telling you what's coming. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. Verse 26, the 7 good cows are 7 years. The 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are 1. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears, blighted by the east wind, are also 7 years of famine. It is, as I told Pharaoh, God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by who? By God. And who? God will shortly bring it about. He goes, this is not in me, man. I'm just the delivery man. I'm just the messenger. I'm the conduit that God uses, but it's God who's telling you what's coming. Joseph repeatedly turns Pharaoh's eyes and mind back to God. It's not about me. It's never been about me. God's the one who has the answer. He refuses the credit. This is God's plans. This is God's idea. This is God foretelling the future. This is God preparing for Egypt. Whatever your gift is, you have been given a gift. Whether it's speaking, whether it's serving, whatever it might be, you have been given a gift not to make yourself famous, but to make God famous. Lift up his name, not yours. Get in the habit of saying, verse 16, it's not in me, it's God. It's not in me, it's God. I don't take the credit. Sure, God used me for that, but man, it's not me. God did it through me. It's not in me, God did it. So what do we do? Because here's what God's doing. We're going to talk more in the coming weeks about how Pharaoh responded to this, but God gave Pharaoh very clear directions. And so what Joseph does is he makes a plan. Look at verse 33. It says, therefore, Joseph says, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers. And so he's saying, there's 7 years of good coming. We need to collect food now. There's 7 years of bad coming after that, and we need to ration it out. You need a man who's going to oversee that. Joseph is setting up a plan and putting this in place. God gave Pharaoh very clear directions, and so Joseph responds. So we're going to talk more about Pharaoh's response in the coming weeks, but let's talk about us for a moment. What about us? When God gives you a glimpse into the future, what do? Here's what you do. You got to do something. You have to act. Put a plan in place. And you need to begin moving forward in that. God, here's the thing about God. God's not a weatherman. He's not making forecasts that are like 90% maybe it'll happen. God is a promiser. When he says it, it's going to happen. You got to know about God. God lives outside of time and space. He's not locked in it like you and I. And so God knows more about the future than we'll ever know about the past or the present. Think about that for a moment. We have this saying like, the hindsight is 20/20, like we've got the past figured out. Wrong. We don't. We're always jaded by our own ideas, our own circumstances, our own experiences. We never fully see 2020 in the past. God not only sees better than we see in the past and better than we see in the present, but he knows all about the future because he's already there. God is outside of time and space. He's just telling Pharaoh what's going to happen. So some of you guys are like, wow, this is great. So next time God gives me a dream about a peek into the future, then I'll know what to do. I need to act. Well, here's the thing. Don't wait for God to tell you what's coming. He already did. He already told us a future plan. And I want to tell you real quickly 3 things that we know for sure. What happens when we respond to what God has to say? Well, I'll tell you 3 things that we know for sure about the future. Number 1, everybody dies. Number 2, everyone will be held accountable. And number 3, everyone is forgivable. That's what I know for sure. Everybody is headed toward the grave, all of us. The Bible says it's appointed for all men to die once. Everybody's headed toward the grave. But we will be held accountable. So either you pay for your sin for the rest of eternity, or you let Jesus pay for your sin. I don't know about you, I choose choice B. I would much rather let Jesus take the brunt of my sin, the brunt of my pain. I'd rather him pay the price for my sin, and Jesus offers that willingly. But the third thing is you got to know everyone's forgivable. See, hell, here's how hell works. God doesn't send people to hell. People choose to go to hell. God has made the way for every person to go to heaven, but people choose to reject him, rebel against him, and go their own way. Heaven, let me tell you about heaven, it won't be filled with a bunch of good people. Heaven will be filled with a bunch of forgiven people. Good people don't get to go to heaven. It's not about, am I good enough? Have I done enough good things? Have I attended church long enough? It's not about any of that. It's about, have you let Jesus pay the price for your sin? Have you surrendered to him? Amen? So, in the middle of a nightmare, your own prison, when nothing else seems like it's fair in your life, I want you to know if you'll remain prayerful, faithful, and available, you'll be living the dream in the middle of the craziest of life's circumstances. The dream that God has for your life, where he'll use you everywhere you go, even if it's in a place where you didn't want to be.